हेलो एवरीवन, सभी को नमस्कार। तो आज है हमारे साथ मिस्टर क्रिस एंड ही इज़ आवर पोस्ट ग्रेजुएट रिसर्च ऑफिसर ऑफ लास्ट ईयर and he is currently elected as vice president for BMW region. And he is from US. So please welcome Mr. Chris. Hi, how are you?
Great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your academic career?
Well, yeah, so my name is Chris Stewart. I'm originally from Indiana in the United States, and I actually did my undergraduate in Indiana as well at Indiana University. I got degrees in mathematics, philosophy, astronomy, and physics.
Mathematics, philosophy, astronomy?
Astronomy and physics.
Oh my god, 4 degrees?
Yeah, 4 degrees, and then I immediately went into a PhD after that at the same university, and I studied higher education and student affairs. Okay. So I knew that I loved the learning process, especially at the university level, and I was really interested in trying to make it more enjoyable and kind of honestly more modern, because especially in things like physics, mathematics, astronomy, it's a lot of methods that haven't been updated in 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
And so even though I love those topics, I wanted to explore how to improve them as well as the overall student experience. And then that kind of led me here in a roundabout way, because I actually moved to Ireland to start my career in higher education. Okay. So I was hoping to work at a college or university in Ireland and kind of work my way up from there.
Okay.
I ended up getting a job at Trinity College as an administrator.
Oh, wow.
And
this is very, like, for me it is shocking news and exciting.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I try not to just tell everybody right off the bat, because it's a weird story. It's usually better over a pint here in Ireland.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I got the job at Trinity as an entry-level administrator, but then this was right before the pandemic hit.
Okay.
And so basically COVID-19 changed everything everywhere.
Yeah.
And so basically, what is that, 2020? Basically, there was a hiring freeze. There was a public hiring freeze across Ireland as a result of the pandemic. And because I was on a temporary visa, that freeze applied to me so that they could not renew my contract.
Okay.
And I had already started kind of, building a life in Ireland and kind of really loving the country and loving the people and trying to figure out how to stay. And so the only way that I could guarantee kind of a legal way to remain in Ireland long term from that uncertain place was to go back to school. And so I ended up getting accepted to a master's program here.
Master's here?
Yes.
Oh my god.
So I did a master's degree.
How many degrees you have collected?
Well, only 5 to this date, because I was not awarded that first PhD, and that's a longer story for another time. I did 6 years of that PhD, completed my qualifying exams, completed my coursework, and I had done everything. I was just writing the dissertation. But, unfortunately, I do not have the degree to show for it.
But you have done it, like, it's your second PhD.
I've done the work, but yes, I don't have the degree. And for some people, that's the difference. For me, I know I did the work.
Like, your things were, like, inside you, you know you have done the work.
Exactly.
Like, degree doesn't matter. Degree matters for some things, but not for your inner thing.
Exactly. I really appreciate you saying that, because it validates the work that people like yourself have done. Because I'm not the only person that's happened. So. But yeah, so I ended up in a master's degree here, and that was a 1-year top master's program in coastal and marine environments.
Marine environment.
So it was a kind of return to science for me, because I really did miss it. And so I was able to do it in a different kind of field and challenge myself in new ways. And then the research that I did in that master's program was actually focused on paleoclimatology. And that master's research led directly into getting funding for this PhD that I'm doing now, which is specifically in paleoclimatology, and it's within the discipline of geography.
Oh my god.
I've done a little bit of everything.
Yeah, you have done a lot of things, and that's impressive.
Well, thanks.
Like, that's very impressive. And I have few questions that you have already answered, that why you landed in Galway, why this university and everything.
Yeah.
So that's all done. But yes. Yeah. So, could you share your experience as a postgraduate research officer in the university?
Yeah, sure. As a kind of an officer within the Students' Union, just in general, first, it's it's a really cool opportunity to just meet people and go to events, plan events, and kind of really get immersed in all the different corners of the university and what students are up to. And that's just amazing on its own. And the team that you work with, you know, there's some friends that you'll probably keep for life.
Yeah.
And then as a postgraduate research officer specifically, wow, like I'm so fortunate to be able to represent roughly 1,000 PhDs and research masters here at the University of Galway. And that covers every single, you know, discipline and all types of just phenomenal research. And these are some of the most amazing people in the world, if you ask me. And to be able to support them and be there for them and kind of listen to the issues that they're having and work to improve the situation and the factors that, you know, are impacting them in any little way, it's really rewarding. And that's really what all of this student union work kind of comes down to. It's just being able to help the people around you, you know, sometimes in really small ways, and sometimes it leads to greater change, and like a whole student movement kind of coalesces around it. And yeah, it's really rewarding.
Yeah, that's great. Like you have done degrees with your positions, and like I just love it.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't know what to do if I wasn't in a college environment. It's where I come from, and it's what I love. And it's a beautiful kind of place.
Okay, and congratulations for your role in USA.
Thank you.
And what's your goals for that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think, you know, I'll have better and more fulfilling answers with time because I haven't started officially.
Yeah.
But you know, kind of broadly, I want to get our regional student unions to be a little bit more cohesive and work together, communicate with each other, and feel a bit more like a community in and of themselves. Because, you know, what I was kind of talking about before is that there is this idea of a larger student movement,
Yeah.
and that can only happen when we're talking with each other, communicating, and supporting each other. And, you know, sometimes issues will be very local, and they always are, but at the same time, you know, when it comes to like accommodation or the cost of living,
Yeah.
that's something impacting all of us, even outside of just being students and researchers, right? So if we can start to really kind of build a bit more of a collective voice and act more as a cohesive unit, then I think we're going to see a bit more rapid pace of change in ways that are going to benefit, well, everyone in the country at the end of the day, but especially those within our university communities.
Okay, that's it's like your work in the your work at the university level will increase at some region, PWL region.
That's the hope, right? Although it'll be a little bit of a different role, whereas as a postgraduate research officer, you get a little bit more kind of focused on, obviously, postgraduate issues, and so policies and stuff.
Now everything covers. Now everything is under you.
Yeah, now I have to, you know, represent everyone and all of the undergraduates and, you know, every different kind of person enrolled at the university. So it's a broader remit by a long shot, and also I'll have to be working on issues that matter to all the different, you know, cohorts within that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like, what are some challenges that the university students, postgraduate students, faces at our university?
Yeah. So specifically, our postgraduates, and I'll probably speak more a little bit on the research side,
Yeah.
since that's my focus at the moment. I mean, it starts out with some of the same issues that everybody's facing, which is accommodation, it is cost of living. But then you get to some more kind of nuanced things that maybe a lot of people don't think about if they're not familiar with the postgraduate lifestyle, which is we're having to delay a lot of the major chapters of our lives, which is starting families and buying houses
Yeah.
and kind of starting our careers when, you know, we're sacrificing that somewhat, we think willingly, but at the same time, it's also because the structures are not there to allow us to raise a family and buy a house
Yeah.
here alongside trying to...
Yeah, we all are in the same situation.
students and researchers from outside of the European Economic Area, the EEA. So that includes the EU and then a handful of other countries like Switzerland and Norway. Because we face a lot more challenges as immigrants from outside of that region, where we have hidden fees that we have to pay every year, such as visa renewals at 300 euros per year at a minimum, not including all the other things that go into that. And then we also have to buy private insurance. And if you want it to be something that's useful, it actually costs a significant amount.
Yeah, and like for getting passport here, we are just lacking. Like 4 years we are lacking.
Yeah, so that's one of the biggest issues, that really it hits home for me, is that anytime you're on the student visa or what's called the stamp 2, that doesn't count for your long-term residency, it doesn't count towards citizenship or anything that gives you long-term stability, which is completely counterintuitive when we're trying to get the highest level of degrees and really try to advance our fields and improve our communities, especially when we're living here in Ireland for so many years. And many of us are funded by the Irish government, and then we don't have a really clear pathway to stay. The best that we get is that with the completion of a PhD, we're given access to a 1-year program where we don't require a work permit. And if you're lucky, you can extend that for a second year, but that's it.
But that's the same for the masters also.
Yes.
So then what is the point of doing PhD?
Exactly. I would agree with that. It's basically disincentivizing the PhD pursuit for anybody who fits into that category, which doesn't make sense to me. In my opinion, every level of education should be accessible to anyone who wants to pursue it, especially those who are highly qualified, which is all of us at this point.
Yes.
So that's really a tough place to be, because Ireland and its people are very welcoming, and they're some of the nicest people I've ever met.
Have you met your partner here in Ireland?
I did.
In Ireland?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Like during your college or?
Yeah, so I met my fiance in my master's program here at the University of Galway. Yeah. She is from the United States as well, but I would have never met her there. She's from the state of Utah. I'm from the state of Indiana. So that's, over 1,500 kilometers apart. There is no way we would have ever met if it wasn't for our tiny little master's program here on the West Coast.
So University of Galway is very lucky for you.
And that's it. I love this university, this city, this community. It has given so much to me, and I really want the opportunity to give back in every way I can. And I would love one day I'd love to be a citizen. That would be the best thing, because then I know I can continue to give back, and there's no timeline.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a lovely answer. How significant are the financial pressure on postgraduate students, and what the university is doing for that?
The financial pressures on postgraduates are immense. And in fact, very few of us ever feel truly comfortable and safe and stable. The fact of the matter is that even though the government and the university have slowly started increasing our stipends, particularly from the start of the year 2024, the vast majority of us are still paid below minimum wage.
Yeah.
And that's not even to speak about a living wage, which basically almost no PhD gets a living wage, which is above the 25,000 mark at this point.
Yeah.
So not only do you get paid below minimum wage on average, but then, especially for those of us coming from outside of the EEA, you have to take out your visa costs, you have to take out your insurance, and that's before you talk about the immense rent and the bills and the other things that we have to pay, especially when half of our tenancies aren't registered with the government. And so we're not protected, and we're not getting leasing rights. Basically, we're forever put into precarious positions, and we're exploited at every step along the way. Most students are.
Yeah.
Postgraduates and those of us coming from outside the EEA in particular are facing such a complex set of challenges, and we need much more support from the university, the government, every angle that we can get.
I can understand that.
I mean, that's not even to speak about the fact that many of us who want to travel back home and see our families, parents, grandparents, cousins, that is another expense, and most of us can't afford to do it even on a yearly basis.
Like even for me, like I have been to India twice, but now I'm thinking like why to go because it's a huge cost.
Yeah.
It's like €1,000 for the ticket and then more expensive.
Exactly. And when now we're talking, that's already like 5%, maybe closer to 10% with all the other aspects involved of your annual income. That's just not sustainable. So you get isolated here, and it's because of financial pressures as well as everything else. So it's a very challenging environment.
Yeah. Yes. This is like the important, very important issue. That can you discuss the working status for postgraduates in Ireland, and is there any initiative that the university or the government is doing for us?
Yeah. So one thing that we've really started to organize around in the last couple of years, particularly within the postgraduate community, is fighting for workers' rights. Because especially when you are a postgraduate researcher, which encompasses PhDs, the vast majority of your time you're not actually being taught in a classroom, and you're not, in a lecture or a tutorial or anything that's a traditional educational setting. You're doing independent research, you're doing field work, you're doing lab work, and you don't have somebody who's advising you over your shoulder constantly. So what we're actually doing is work in any other context. It's just that the university, speaking broadly, not just this university, but the university just doesn't recognize it as work because historically it hasn't. But it doesn't stand up to much scrutiny.
But it was in some countries it is.
Yes, you beat me to the punch. In fact, in the European Union, more and more countries are moving to PhDs as workers as a standard model. Now, there will always be kind of shades of different forms of kind of PhD models, whether there are required modules or it's completely unstructured or somebody's completely self-funded. And if anybody wants to pursue a PhD that's self-funded, that's fine. But the vast majority of us fit into a category where we are doing work and it's not being recognized as work. And so not only does that mean we're getting not paid as workers, but we're not getting other protections as workers. We're not getting paid sick leave. We're not getting paid maternity leave. We're not getting
Things like the public services,
exactly.
like the disability services, like the health things. We are not getting. Like I have applied for some health thing, and they said, "Oh, you are not the citizen here."
Exactly. So those of us who are visa required and on stamp 2, we are technically barred from receiving any public services.
Yeah.
So it's yet another way of isolating and marginalizing us as an immigrant community, and it further increases the financial pressures and other pressures that we face. And yes, so if we were workers, that wouldn't be allowable. We would actually have access to the basic public services that any other workers would receive. But the university and other aspects of governmental structure benefit from not allowing us that right or that set of rights, because that's basically to them, they just want more money, and we can't do that. They haven't deserved it. They don't. Yeah. And unfortunately, it kind of speaks to the attitude of academic tradition in a negative way, where everything kind of is hid behind a veneer of tradition, whether it's good or bad. And it's tradition to exploit PhD researchers and get a ton of research and work out of them for free. But that doesn't make it right. And that's something that we, especially as students and researchers who are supposed to be the future of our world, we need to be speaking up about and fighting against and fighting for our rights and the rights of everyone who comes after us. So that's kind of where we're at. And so Ireland is in a unique place where it is very, very slow to be open on a national or even local level to PhDs as workers. The government, again, like I said, slowly been moving stipends up, but it's not keeping track with cost of living or anything like that. And it's kind of trying to delay as long as it can dealing with us in any meaningful way, even though smaller and larger countries are moving to PhD as workers model. We got Estonia, which just in the last 12 or 24 months has moved entirely into a workers model. The Netherlands is another one that has moved primarily to a workers model, so now they're protected as workers.
So it's like it can be possible. They have to do something. Just they have to start. Like we want it.
Yes, it is entirely possible, and it only requires a little bit of political will. But that's only going to come from us organizing, uniting, and speaking up. And that's kind of why I've gotten involved as I have, and I'm continuing to be involved, not just for PhDs, but for everyone that I can, because we're at a critical time in Ireland. We have an election year coming up on the national level. We just had local and European elections. Here at our university, we just had a surprise announcement.
Last day.
We have our president who will be moving on, and we also have a deputy president who just moved on. So there's a lot of leadership change occurring at many different levels here in Ireland and in the higher education system. So now we really need to take the opportunity to speak up together and make sure that our needs are being taken care of appropriately, because they've been ignored for way too long.
That's how we can do something for the society and for ourselves also. So, do you have any suggestions for improving the accommodation crisis?
Yeah, the accommodation crisis is always a classic. And unfortunately, you can point to a lot of different kind of actors who make an impact in it or don't at different levels of government. And so instead of focusing on just like one person or a group of people, basically the government has been very friendly to landlords instead of those who are renting for the better part of a couple of decades at the very least. That's probably being generous. And that needs to change. And that's only going to change again if we're vocal and we're collaborating and we're organizing, not just at the university level, but at the grassroots level in our local communities and kind of nationwide. Because houses are not being built, or accommodation is not being built at a rapid enough pace to sustain even the current population, much less any additional immigrants. And so a lot of political parties, as well as independent politicians, are using that as an excuse to point the finger at immigrants as the problem. The problem isn't immigrants. The problem is that there aren't enough houses, and that also means that there's this unnecessary inflated pricing because the housing market is so skewed in favor of one side, the supply side, if you will. So there isn't an incentive to actually meet the needs of the populace because the government hasn't provided the incentive. It hasn't shifted that focus to treating people equally as human beings with human rights and a need for housing.
Perfect. How can the universities better support the mental health and well-being of the postgraduates?
Yeah, well, honestly, the first step is to pay us what we deserve. And even if it's not keeping track with the rest of the world in certain ways, pay us a living wage. Allow us to live healthily in our communities, and our mental health will improve as a result. You know, whether you ascribe to a certain psychological perspectives or not, there's, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have to take care of the basic human needs before you can focus on everything that kind of builds on top of it. And so we need the resources to be safely and stably accommodated in our communities. We need to be able to feed ourselves. We have the student pantry here, which is an amazing thing. But it's because we have so many students and researchers who are unable to feed themselves based off of the resources they are given or not given. And to me, that's unconscionable. We can't even solve hunger on our own campus. And yet we're spending €500,000 at least rebranding this university. The priorities here are completely disjointed. They focus on the building blocks of our universities, which is our students and our researchers, are completely not the top priority, which is the inverse of what any university should be.
Yeah.
And that's taking place all over the country. It's not just here. There are student pantries in other parts of the country. Yeah, we were one of the first, which is unfortunate because that's not something you want to have to lead the way on. It's just good that we're actually responding to the needs of our students and students.
It's strange, but yes, we have to do, like we'll do.
Yeah, and so if I can say another aspect of that, so once you can get through those basic needs, what the university can do for postgraduates, mental health especially, is to welcome us and make us feel like we belong to the university. Give us the free time to actually participate in staff groups or in student societies or in sports clubs, because those are all there because those are human. And those are things that build a community and build bonds and improve networking and cohesion. And it just makes everybody happier and makes a much healthier environment. But generally speaking, we're excluded from that, especially because we are working hours that are more than we should. We're getting paid much less than we should. And many of us have to live farther away from campus than these other groups because it's unfeasible to live anywhere around campus. And so, even if I want to join the mountaineering club and I get their emails, I haven't been able to attend a single thing.
Yeah, it's hard to live far, and yes. Would you recommend anyone from US to study in Ireland or in Galway specifically?
Yeah, that's a really tough question because, like I've said, I truly love it here and I love the community here and I love trying to really be an invested member in the community. This university has offered me a lot. But at the same time, I've seen it absolutely ruin other people's lives. So I can't tell anybody in good faith to come here specifically without saying that there's some real risk, especially if you are coming from a visa required place, including the United States. If you, as a US citizen, are not necessarily interested in long-term residency or citizenship in Ireland or Europe in general, okay, then maybe you can ignore it for the 4 years or however long you'll be here, and that's okay. But it's going to be more expensive than you think. And it's going to be more challenging than you think, even though as an American, you might think you have a lot in common with Irish people. Maybe you do, but I would say most people kind of overestimate exactly what it means to live in Ireland and be Irish. I'm not saying that I know it, and I've been here for 5 years. So be humble if you do decide to come here, and ask questions, be open-minded, and understand that the United States isn't the only country in the world. That's an important one.
Yes.
And then honestly though, I would say look at other places in the European Union in particular. Unless you can get a Marie Curie scholarship, which is one of the very few that would allow you to work as a PhD and earn enough money to live comfortably enough here. That's your top one if you want to come to Ireland is Marie Curie. Your second is to get a research hosting agreement. That is the only other primary pathway that allows for basically external researchers or PhD students to be here on a working visa and have a long-term path for residency that's stable and protected. You'll never deal with this student visa nonsense that many of us are subjected to. So if you can get Marie Curie or a research hosting agreement, then you can consider coming here. If not, I would say look at other places in the European Union or in the European Economic Area because you should go somewhere where you'll have working rights as a PhD, and you should go somewhere that's going to pay you a living wage for the area that you're going to be in. Because at the end of the day, what you're going to be doing for 4 years is primarily work. Even if they call it study, if they call it instruction or training, it doesn't matter. You're going to be doing work. And so you should be treated fairly for the work that you're doing.
Do you have any tips for the viewers who are postgraduate students and if they want to connect you directly? So
Yeah. I'm more than happy to get in touch. And so for the viewers, if you are in Ireland, and then perhaps I will be representing you in our National Students Union. And so you can get in touch with me for anything that you're dealing with yourselves. And then just for anyone in general who has got questions, wants to get in touch, the best way to get in contact with me is just my name in reverse. So Stewart, Stewart .m.chris, CHRIS @gmail.com. And I welcome anybody to get in touch.
Okay, perfect. And what's the meaning of your name, Chris?
Well, the full thing is Christopher, and if you go back, I think it's like a Greek origin. It means bearer of Christ, so it's like a really Christian thing.
And what religion you follow?
I'm not religious,
You're not,
but I come from a Catholic family. Made it a little bit easier to move to Ireland, but it's still not exactly this.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And guys, please like, share, and subscribe if you like the podcast. And we'll see you in the next or new podcast with new different person.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Of course.